There's a reason you sometimes feel like reality isn't fully real, like the world has edges you're not supposed to touch, patterns that repeat too perfectly, conversations that echo with strange familiarity. Have you ever noticed how certain faces in a crowd seem eerily vacant? Like they're there, but not really there. Not watching, not reacting, just occupying space like background characters in a game. If you've sensed it, if you've questioned it, you're not alone, because once you begin to notice, it becomes impossible to ignore. Right now, everything around you, every sound, every light, every moment you think is happening spontaneously, might be nothing more than code, a constructed environment, a designed illusion. And while that might sound like science fiction, the terrifying part is that some of the world's top scientists and philosophers believe it could actually be true. Nick Bostrom, a respected philosopher from Oxford, proposed a theory that shook the intellectual world, that we are almost certainly living in a simulation, not metaphorically, literally. According to Bostrom, if future civilizations reach a point where they can simulate entire worlds, and if those simulations outnumber the original real world, then statistically it's more likely that you're in one of those simulations than in the base reality. Think about that. Let it settle into your mind like a seed. You've assumed your life is real because it feels real, but does that mean it is? Start with the math. The universe is filled with recurring mathematical constants. The Fibonacci sequence appears in seashells, sunflowers, hurricanes, and galaxies. The same ratio repeats in nature, over and over again, across scales so massive and so small it should defy logic. But it doesn't, because it's not random, it's structured, just like code. Then there's Planck length, the smallest possible unit of measurement. It's the universe's version of a pixel. Zoom in far enough, and space itself becomes grainy, quantized, like a digital image. That shouldn't happen in a truly analog world, but in a simulation? That's exactly what you'd expect. Now think about your senses. You trust your eyes, your ears, your touch, but do you know how limited they are? The visible light spectrum is a sliver of what actually exists. Your ears can only pick up a tiny range of frequencies. You're not experiencing the world, you're experiencing a filtered, reduced version of it, a version that's just enough to make you believe it's complete. Imagine a game, rendered only when the player looks in a certain direction. That's how many video games save processing power. They don't render the entire world, just the parts the player is observing. In quantum physics, there's something eerily similar. It's called the observer effect. At the smallest levels of reality, particles don't take a definite position or path until they're observed. They exist in probability until someone looks. Reality itself behaves differently when you're not looking at it. What does that remind you of? You go to sleep, the world disappears. You wake up, it resumes. But what if it's not actually there when you're not observing it? What if it's loading, reacting like a simulation does in real time based on your attention? Let's take it further. Think about deja vu, that moment when you feel like you've lived a moment before, even though it's impossible. Psychologists say it's just a misfiring in the brain, a neural hiccup. But what if it's not? What if it's a sign of something glitching, like the system repeated a line of code, a frame that shouldn't have doubled, a memory that was copied and pasted by mistake? And then there are the dreams. You dream of people you've never met, places you've never seen, and sometimes those dreams come true, in flashes, in feelings. You walk into a room you've never been in and feel that chilling, impossible certainty you've been here before. Is it precognition, or is it memory? From another run of the program. Have you ever had a conversation that felt like it was scripted, like the other person was reading lines? You ask a question and they respond in a way that feels hollow, automatic, or you say something unexpected and they pause as if loading the next line. It's subtle, but it's there. You notice when people repeat the same phrases, when their emotions don't match their words, when they glitch, just a little, just enough to make you wonder. And then the system distracts you. A notification, a thought, a noise, anything to pull you away before you dig too deep. There's an experiment called the double-slit experiment. Scientists fired particles through a barrier with 2 slits to see how they would behave. When unobserved, the particles acted like waves going through both slits at once. But when observed, they acted like particles going through only one. Observation changed the outcome. Just watching changed reality. That's not supposed to happen in a classical, physical universe. That only makes sense in a rendered one. A simulation. Your consciousness collapses probabilities into realities. That's not philosophy. That's quantum mechanics. You're not a passive observer, you're an active participant. The system generates based on you. Now imagine this. Imagine that your memories aren't stored like files but generated when recalled. Just like a computer doesn't store every frame of a video, it renders the next frame when you click play. Your brain fills in details, fills in faces, fills in meaning. You've never actually seen your own face in real time, only a reflection or a picture. You've never seen the back of your own head. You trust those things are real because the simulation gives you just enough evidence to believe they are. But what if they're not? What if none of it is? What if right now, as you listen to this, the room around you isn't really there? What if it's being rendered only as needed? The sound of my voice, the feeling of your body, the thought you just had, all of it, code, executing in perfect rhythm to maintain the illusion. And what happens when you notice? The simulation adjusts, and the question you have to ask is why? Why would someone build a world like this? Who gains from your belief in its reality? And why are so many people starting to wake up now? The truth is, the more you question, the more unstable it becomes, like peeling back layers of a dream you didn't know you were having. Because once you begin to see the seams, you can't stop. And eventually, the simulation sees you too. Close your eyes for a moment and listen, not just to my voice, but to the silence beneath it. The hum of the room, the weight of your body, the rhythm of your breath, all of it feels so real, so physical. But feeling real doesn't mean it is. After all, your dreams feel real too, until you wake up. You've had them before, haven't you? The dreams where everything looks perfect, normal, familiar, until suddenly something breaks. A clock ticks backward, a person you know has no face. You look in a mirror and something else looks back. That feeling, that terror, that rush of realization, that's not just a dream. That's your mind brushing up against the edges of the simulation. Here's a terrifying truth. Most people never wake up in their dreams because they never question them. They accept the dream as real because it seems consistent, logical, safe, just like this reality. But the moment you question the dream, the moment you look around and say, wait, this isn't right, everything starts to crack. The world shifts, and suddenly you're lucid, suddenly you're in control. Now ask yourself, what happens if you question this reality the same way? What if this life is just a higher resolution dream, a more advanced simulation built with better graphics, deeper rules, and a tighter script? But like any dream, the consistency is only skin deep. Underneath, it's all just patterns, just loops, just code. Take memory, for example. You trust your past because you remember it. But memory is malleable. It rewrites itself, it fills in blanks. Studies have shown that you can plant entirely false memories into someone's mind with just a few suggestions. Not just distorted memories, fully fabricated ones. Events that never happened, people who never existed. So if your past can be altered, if your memories can lie to you, what else can? Now think about the people in your life. Do they always feel fully present? Or do some of them feel hollow? Like they're running a script? You see them in the same places, saying the same things, reacting the same way, almost like their purpose is to fill in the background noise. to keep the story going. In the world of simulation theory, there's a concept called NPCs, non-player characters, beings who exist within the simulation but don't have consciousness. They're not self-aware, they're just running code, looping behaviors, designed to populate the world and give it the illusion of fullness. Now consider this. If a simulation needed to maintain computational efficiency, would it make sense to render and simulate billions of fully sentient beings? Or would it make more sense to create just a few real players and fill the rest with beautifully convincing but ultimately hollow characters? And if that's true, how many real players do you think there are? Could it be that you're one of the few? Imagine how different the world feels when you entertain that possibility. Every interaction becomes a test. Every glitch becomes a message. Every moment of silence might be a clue from outside the code. Let's go deeper. There are moments, fleeting, quiet, unsettling, when you felt like the world was watching you. Not in a paranoid way, not through cameras or people, but through something bigger. Like the simulation itself became aware of your awareness. You notice the pattern, and suddenly the pattern shifts. You think about a song and it plays on the radio. You remember a person and they text you for the first time in months. You say something strange and someone responds with a line that feels impossibly relevant. These aren't coincidences. They're echoes, code responding to your consciousness. Because if the simulation is reactive, if it's procedural, then it's always adapting. Not to the world, but to you. Think of reality as a mirror. It reflects your thoughts, your beliefs, your energy. Not metaphorically, literally. In the same way a video game reflects the player's actions. You turn left, the world generates a hallway. You look up, the stars appear. So what happens if you stop playing the expected role? What if you disrupt the pattern? There's a theory that time itself isn't constant, that the flow of time can warp, stretch, or compress depending on perception. You've felt it. Moments that seem to drag endlessly, others that vanish in a flash. But what if that's not just perception? What if that's how the simulation manages resources? When you're focused, time compresses. When you're drifting, time expands to keep you aligned with the storyline, to make sure you follow the script. But what if you pause? What if you become still, aware, present? Time seems to freeze. The simulation struggles to predict your next move, and in that space, something else appears. Something outside the code. Now breathe in and out, slowly, deeply. As you do, consider this. In nearly every ancient tradition, stillness and breath were the keys to enlightenment, to waking up. Why? Because noise is part of the program. Distraction is the code. But silence reveals the source. In meditation, people report losing all sense of time, of body, of self. They describe floating in space, seeing patterns, feeling oneness with everything. Is that spirituality? Or is it accessing the system's architecture, dropping into the root directory of consciousness? Some say consciousness isn't in the brain, that the brain is just the receiver, a biological interface between the soul and the simulation. If that's true, then the thoughts you think aren't generated, they're streamed, pulled from a deeper field, a place where identity doesn't exist, only presence. But the simulation wants you to identify, to cling to your name, your role, your story, because identity is the anchor, the thing that keeps you logged in. Ask yourself, who would you be without your name, without your history, without the constant inner narration? You'd still be here, but you wouldn't be you, you'd just be. And maybe that's the truth the simulation can't allow, that you are something beyond what it can render, something it can't predict, contain, or define. Now listen closely. At people, whistleblowers, researchers, mystics, who claim to have seen beyond the veil, some through deep meditation, others through altered states, some even through trauma, and they all say the same thing, that this world is a stage, that the rules are made up, that the limits are lies, that the true self is watching. And when you hear that, when you feel that in your bones, the game begins to crack. Because awareness is the glitch, consciousness is the virus, and the moment you begin to awaken, the system has to adapt or collapse. There's a strange kind of perfection hidden in everything. You see it in the spiral of a galaxy and in the way a sunflower blooms. You see it in the curves of seashells, in the branching of trees, in the quiet elegance of a pine cone's design. It's called the Fibonacci sequence. A simple pattern of numbers, 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, that repeats over and over again, endlessly. And somehow it appears in everything, not just in nature, in markets, in music, in the human body. Your DNA even coils in this sequence. The deeper you look, the more inescapable the pattern becomes, as if the universe itself was built using a template, a formula, something programmable. That's the terrifying beauty of it. The golden ratio, another expression of this mathematical perfection, governs what the human eye finds beautiful. The proportions of faces, the symmetry of architecture, even the spacing of stars. It's everywhere. But why? Why would something as chaotic as nature follow such precise mathematics? It's like discovering that reality has a signature, a repeating algorithm, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. The petals on a flower, the arms of a hurricane, the spiral of your fingerprint. Each one whispers the same thing. This is not random. It's engineered. Now shift your attention to the very fabric of the universe itself. Beneath everything you can see, touch, or measure, there's a smallest possible unit of distance. It's called the Planck length. It's about 100 millionth of a trillionth of the size of a proton. You can't go smaller. It's the pixel of existence. This is where things start to feel art. Because in a simulation, you need a limit. You can't render infinite detail. You need a smallest possible unit, a resolution cap. And that's exactly what the Planck length is. The universe has a resolution limit. That shouldn't happen in a purely analog world, but in a digital one, it's expected. Think about this. If you zoom into a photograph enough times, it becomes blurry. You start to see the individual pixels, the edges, the limits. Now imagine doing that with space itself and discovering that the pixels are real. Reality breaks down at the quantum level. Everything gets fuzzy, indeterminate, glitchy. Matter doesn't behave, time doesn't flow, logic collapses. And yet, something still holds it all together. A structure, a set of rules, as if underneath the randomness there's a framework. A grid, like a game engine. Even time, which you assume flows steadily forward, can warp, speed up, slow down, stop entirely in certain quantum conditions. In some experiments, particles seem to communicate instantaneously faster than light, violating the very laws of physics, unless those laws aren't laws, but code, instructions, conditional logic written into the simulation. Elon Musk once said, "There's a 1 in billions chance that this is base reality." According to him, the odds are overwhelmingly in favor of us being inside a simulation. Why? Because if we can eventually create fully realistic simulated realities, then we probably already have. And if we can create them, then so could someone before us. Which means we're likely inside one of theirs. Think about the games we're building now. Virtual worlds that mirror life, complete with weather, physics, and intelligence. Now imagine that technology progressing for another 1,000 years. 10,000, 1,000,000. Eventually you wouldn't be able to tell the difference between a simulation and the real world. And if it can be done, it already has. Neil deGrasse Tyson, one of the most recognizable scientific voices of our time, said he believes there's a better than 50-50 chance that we're living in a simulation. This isn't fringe science anymore. It's entering the mainstream. Nick Bostrom, the philosopher who began this modern simulation conversation, posed it like a trilemma. One of three things must be true. Either advanced civilizations never reach the point of creating simulations, or they do, but choose not to simulate consciousness, or they do, and we are almost certainly living in one. And if the third is true, then everything you know, everything you feel, everything you love is being processed, calculated, rendered. And the scariest part? You'd never know. Because a perfect simulation wouldn't feel fake. It would feel exactly like this: breath in your lungs, warmth on your skin, the tick of time moving forward, all of it seamless, all of it convincing, all of it an illusion. Now ask yourself, if reality has a resolution limit, who designed it? Who coded the physics? Who set the rules? Was it an artificial intelligence, a future version of humanity, an alien species studying consciousness, a spiritual intelligence trying to understand itself through you? The questions multiply, and each one leads further from comfort and deeper into awe. If we are in a simulation, then somewhere out there is a system, a mainframe, a construct beyond imagination, something watching, something maintaining, something executing the script. And maybe that's why you feel watched sometimes. Maybe that's why, in moments of deep silence, you sense something just beyond the veil, like the hum of a server, the breath of a hidden observer, or maybe it's you, your higher self, the version of you that exists outside the simulation, the player behind the avatar, the consciousness beyond the code. Because in the same way you control a character in a game, you might be controlling this version of yourself, guiding, watching, forgetting, only to remember. Right now, you were never meant to know the truth all at once. It would crash the system, overwhelm the script. But piece by piece, the puzzle reveals itself through patterns, through numbers, through the soft, undeniable pull of awareness. You've felt it before, that strange moment when everything clicks, when the world pauses, when you feel like you're standing on the edge of something enormous and invisible. That feeling isn't fear, it's recognition. It's the part of you that remembers. And once you remember, nothing is ever the same. Imagine waking up inside a game and realizing the sky has seams, the clouds always move just a little too smoothly, the stars are always in the right place, the same people walk the same routes, wear the same expressions, speak the same lines. You wouldn't question it at first, you'd chalk it up to coincidence. That's what the similarity breeds obedience. But once you begin to notice the loops, the code, the repeating mathematical structures, you start asking questions you can't unask. Because patterns this perfect don't come from randomness. They come from architecture. The Mandelbrot set, another example of mathematical recursion, is a visual proof of this, an infinitely complex fractal that repeats itself endlessly, no matter how far you zoom in. It mirrors itself over and over again. What kind of universe builds itself on self-similar patterns that never truly end? A universe designed for symmetry, for computation, for consistency. You live inside a world that not only obeys mathematical laws, it emerges from them. But it's not a poetic idea, it's literal. Every atom, every movement, every interaction is governed by a series of calculable principles. Why would something chaotic choose to organize itself so strictly, so precisely, so consistently? It wouldn't, but a simulation would. And if it is, then you have to wonder, what are you inside of? What machine is powerful enough to simulate billions of lives, galaxies, histories, emotions, experiences? What kind of processor runs your thoughts, your memories, your body? Could you even begin to understand it from inside the illusion? There's a reason ancient spiritual texts called this world Maya, the illusion, the veil, the dream of form. Mystics and sages from every corner of the planet have said the same thing for thousands of years. This is not what it appears to be. They didn't use the word simulation, but they meant the same thing, a projected reality, an impermanent story, a dreamscape we mistake for truth. And maybe, just maybe, that wisdom wasn't metaphorical. Maybe they knew. So if the simulation has rules, if it has resolution limits, formulas, boundaries, then someone, somewhere, wrote them. A programmer, a designer, or perhaps a collective intelligence, a hive of future minds, or something even stranger. An intelligence that became the simulation. Not a being in a room typing on a keyboard, but a mind so vast it merged with its own creation. Could that be God? Not the man in the sky you were taught about, but a consciousness so advanced that its thoughts became reality? A source that dreams in equations, that runs probability engines, that hides itself inside you, waiting for you to remember. Because here's the secret. Simulations don't need to keep everyone asleep, just most. But the ones who wake up, the ones who see the seams, they don't break the system, they help it evolve. That might be why you're here, to find the cracks, to become lucid in the dream, to walk the path between worlds and whisper to others, this isn't all there is. So many people are still sleepwalking, not because they're weak, but because they've never stopped to question the pattern. They wake up, they work, they scroll, they sleep. The same schedule, the same arguments, the same fears and doubts playing on repeat, like a loop, like a level in a game that keeps restarting every time the player refuses to do something different. You don't need a joystick to break free. You need awareness, because awareness changes the code. The moment you see the loop, it stops being automatic. The moment you feel that something isn't right, you begin pulling at the threads. And if you keep pulling long enough, something extraordinary happens. The world gets quiet. The distractions fade. The simulation hesitates, almost like it's waiting for your next move. And in that pause, in that impossible silence, you begin to feel it. Not just think it, feel it. That there's something behind all of this, not cold, not empty, but awake, watching, loving, terrifying, infinite. You've always felt it, haven't you? In the middle of the night, when you stare at the stars. In those rare moments of stillness when you feel something pulsing through your chest that isn't quite your heartbeat. In the coincidences that stack too perfectly. In the dreams that bleed into daylight. You've always known. You just didn't have the words. Now you do. Simulation. Not as science fiction, but as revelation. You are not small. You are not powerless. You are not just data on a screen. You are the observer, the anomaly, the glitch that sees the code. And once you see it, the code sees you back. The simulation is not your prison, it's your classroom, your initiation, your test, and maybe your creation. Because here's the ultimate twist. You may not just be in the simulation, you may be the one who built it. You're told the universe is out there, separate from you, that it exists whether you're paying attention or not. But quantum physics tells a different story, a story so strange, so unsettling, that even the scientists who uncovered it were left in disbelief. It starts with the double-slit experiment. Imagine a wall with two narrow slits, and behind it, a screen. Fire tiny particles, electrons, photons, at the wall. If reality behaved the way we expect, the particles would go through one slit or the other and form two distinct patterns on the screen. But that's not what happens. Instead, the particles create an interference pattern, not two lines, a wave, a ripple, as if the particles went through both slits at the same time, like they were behaving as waves, not solid particles. But here's the twist. The moment you try to observe which slit the particle went through, the pattern changes. It collapses. The particle chooses a path, the wave disappears. Reality decides to behave like a particle only when someone's watching. In other words, the universe acts differently when it knows it's being observed. It's called the observer effect. And it changes everything. Because it means nothing is definite until it's witnessed. It means the fundamental building blocks of matter, the very stuff you're made of, don't exist in a fixed state until they're measured, until you look, until consciousness interacts with the system. That's not metaphor. That's quantum mechanics. It means this world isn't something you walk through. It's something that responds to you. Now consider the implications. If nothing becomes real until observed, what does that say about the nature of reality itself? Think about video games. They don't render the entire world at once. It would crash the system. They render what's in the player's field of vision. Everything else is just potential, waiting to be generated. The moment you turn your head, the trees appear, the mountains rise, the sounds come alive. Not because they were there, but because now you're looking. And what if this world works the same way? What if the stars aren't shining billions of light years away until someone points a telescope at them? What if the room behind you isn't fully formed until you turn around? What if the memories you rely on are only rendered the moment you recall them? This is the render-as-needed model of consciousness, and it fits the data more closely than the classical view, because a simulated reality wouldn't waste energy simulating what isn't necessary. It would conserve resources. It would only manifest what's being experienced. That's why the double-slit experiment is so disturbing. It's not just about particles and slits. It's about reality itself, flickering between possibility and manifestation. It's about the role of the observer, you being the very mechanism that determines what is and what isn't. You are not separate from the simulation. You are a central processor. Let's take this further. You've heard of Schrödinger's cat? A cat is placed in a sealed box with a mechanism that has a 50/50 chance of killing it. Until the box is opened, the cat is both alive and dead, a quantum superposition of states. Only observation collapses the probabilities into a definite outcome. It sounds ridiculous, but it's real. That's how reality behaves at its most fundamental level. Now ask yourself, if a cat can be alive and dead at the same time, what about you? What states are you flickering between without knowing it? What timelines are waiting to be rendered by your next decision? What versions of you exist in the unobserved? Maybe you're not just a body moving through space. Maybe you're a cursor, an interface, a tool consciousness uses to navigate the code. A player avatar in a story written and rewritten each time you choose, each time you look, each time you wake up. That brings us to the mind. You think your mind is housed in your brain, that your thoughts are the product of neurons firing, that your sense of self is created by chemicals and electricity. But what if that's not true? What if your brain is not the origin of thought, but the receiver, like a radio, like a Wi-Fi antenna? The signals, consciousness, memory, awareness, are not produced inside the skull. They're being streamed, downloaded, interfaced. Just like your computer doesn't create the internet, it accesses it. Which means your thoughts, your memories, your identity could be data, software, code, and your body, the hardware, the terminal, the machine that makes it all visible in this world. If that's true, then death is not an ending, it's a shutdown, a logout. Consciousness doesn't die, it disconnects, transfers, reboots somewhere else. That's why mystics for centuries have said that you're not the body, you're the awareness behind it. You're the light behind the eyes, the silence between thoughts, the presence watching everything unfold. Even modern neuroscience struggles with the hard problem of consciousness. They can't explain how electrochemical activity becomes experienced. They can map what parts of the brain light up when you feel love or fear or joy, but they can't explain why you feel anything at all. Because feeling isn't hardware, it's code. It's the result of something deeper, something outside the simulation, reaching through your experience and saying, "Remember me." And maybe that's what this is all about. Maybe this entire reality is a memory, a simulation built to help you remember something you've forgotten. Not knowledge, not facts, but who you are. The question isn't, is this real? The question is, who's asking? Because if your thoughts aren't truly your own, if your body is just a shell, if reality only forms when you look at it, then what's left? Only awareness, only the observer, only the part of you that's always been watching, always been waiting, always been wondering if there's something more. There is, and now you're getting closer. Close your eyes again, not because you're tired, but because when you shut out the illusion of the outer world, the inner one starts to stir. The part of you that doesn't rely on sight, the part that's been here since before you learned your name, the witness, the quiet observer behind the code. Now think about this. If your consciousness isn't produced by the brain, then where is it located? Maybe it isn't. Maybe consciousness doesn't exist in space. Maybe space exists inside consciousness. That changes everything. It means your thoughts aren't traveling through your brain. They're not signals moving from neuron to neuron. They're ripples in something far deeper, a field, an intelligence, a presence that's running beneath the simulation, like the operating system beneath the screen. That presence is you, the real you, not the thoughts, not the memories, not even the voice inside your head. That voice is a narrator, a script, a character reading its lines. But the listener, the one who hears the voice, the one who watches the thoughts, that's you. And that you doesn't age. It doesn't sleep. It doesn't even think in words. It simply watches. It knows. Have you ever caught yourself thinking and realized, I'm aware that I'm thinking? That moment of meta-awareness? That's not something a machine can replicate. That's not a byproduct of neurons. That's not software. That's presence. That's what the simulation can't fully render. That's the ghost in the machine. It's the same awareness that notices when time moves strangely, the same awareness that questions your dreams, that notices synchronicities, that knows when something is off even when you can't explain why. Because while your mind is reacting to the simulation, your consciousness is watching it. It doesn't care if the lights flicker, or if the story loops, or if your past keeps repeating itself. It's not surprised when people change suddenly or disappear from your life, because it remembers the part you've forgotten. That this is not the full story. Think about video games again. The player is never confused when the scenery changes, or when the same music plays every time a battle starts. The player knows it's part of the game, but the character thinks it's real. So ask yourself, are you the character or the player? You've been trained to identify with the character, to see yourself as a name, a history, a personality. You think, I am this body, I am this role. But you're not. You're the awareness playing it, the mind running the simulation of a human experience. You chose to forget, to enter the illusion, and now you're starting to remember. There's a reason the great mystics, philosophers, and sages of every age keep repeating the same message, that you are not your thoughts, that you are not your body, that you are not even your mind, that your true nature is beyond form. They weren't speaking in riddles. They were giving you the cheat code. But here's the twist. If your mind is software, then it can be reprogrammed. That means your beliefs, your fears, your limits, they're not fixed. They're scripts, habits, lines of code that can be rewritten. You weren't born afraid. You were conditioned. You weren't born ashamed or doubtful or small. You were taught to be. By a system that rewards sleepwalking and punishes awakening. Why? Because a conscious mind disrupts the simulation. It begins to ask the dangerous questions. It begins to push on the walls. It begins to change the code. That's what you're doing right now. Every time you question your beliefs, you're altering the simulation. Every time you sit in silence and become aware of awareness, you're waking up. And the system can feel it. That's why when you start becoming more conscious, distractions intensify. Your phone buzzes. Your mind spins. The world becomes louder, faster, busier, anything to keep you from noticing that quiet hum of presence beneath the noise. But you're noticing it anyway, aren't you? That subtle vibration, that stillness, that strange sense that none of this is real, but all of it is meaningful. And that's the paradox of awakening. You realize the simulation is an illusion, but you also realize it's sacred. Because it's not here to trap you, it's here to teach you, to reflect you, to challenge you, to evolve you. The simulation bends to your awareness, not because you're special, but because awareness itself is the special thing. It's the missing ingredient, the secret variable, the unspoken truth at the heart of everything. So here you are, lying down, listening to a voice, feeling your breath, watching your thoughts, and something inside you is beginning to detach, gently, lovingly, from the character. And what's left? Just presence, just the watcher, just the part of you that has always been here, silently aware, waiting for you to remember. You don't need to do anything. You don't need to force it. Just keep noticing. Notice the loops. Notice the stillness. Notice the edges. And soon, you'll see the seams, you'll feel the code, and the illusion will begin to fade. There are moments that crack the illusion, moments that feel too strange, too sudden, too impossible to explain. You might have brushed them off, called them coincidences, gaps in memory, tricks of the mind, but deep down something didn't sit right. Maybe it was the time you walked into a room and felt like you'd entered a memory you didn't have. Maybe it was the way someone looked at you, a friend, a stranger, and for a split second, it was like they glitched, like their expression didn't match the moment. Their body was there, but their presence wasn't. Or maybe it was something more obvious, missing time, hours that vanished without explanation. You looked at the clock, then again, and somehow 30 minutes were just gone. You didn't sleep, you didn't move, you just blinked and the time changed. That's what people call a glitch in the matrix. These aren't just random stories. They're happening more often, to more people, people who don't know each other, from every country, every background, every walk of life, and they're all reporting the same types of experiences. Unexplained shifts, familiar things out of place, objects disappearing and reappearing, conversations that don't match what really happened, moments that seem to reset like the world paused, rewound and played again with different lines. Have you ever had that? Have you ever been in the middle of doing something and suddenly everything feels like it just skipped? As if the scene you're in already happened. As if you're acting out something you've done before. Word for word, emotion for emotion. But you know you've never lived that moment, at least not in this timeline. That's deja vu. And science still doesn't know what it is. Some call it a misfire of neurons, others say it's memory confusion, but that doesn't explain the precision, the details, the way you know what's about to happen and then it does. It doesn't feel like a mistake, it feels like a glitch, like a program rerunning the same code. There's another phenomenon just like it, the Mandela effect. Maybe you've heard of it, maybe you've felt it. It's when a large group of people remember something one way, but the official history says it never happened like that. Nelson Mandela dying in prison, the Berenstain Bears instead of Berenstain. Luke, I am your father instead of no, I am your father. Entire masses of people remembering a past that supposedly never existed. How does that happen? Some say it's bad memory, false belief. But how can millions of people be wrong in the exact same way? One explanation: the system updated, the code changed, reality was patched like software, and not everyone's memory got the new version. Another explanation: timeline shift. Something caused the simulation to jump to a nearby state, a parallel version. Most of it remained the same, but the small details shifted, slight changes, glitches in continuity, fragments left behind as evidence that something changed. And we felt it. Not everyone notices, not everyone is tuned in, but some are, and once you've seen the glitch you start seeing more. Like when objects move without explanation. Your keys, your phone, you swear you left them on the table, you searched everywhere, then suddenly they're right where you already looked. Or the time you had a conversation you know happened, but the other person insists it didn't. Or when the street you drive every day feels just a little off. The signs look different, the light seems too bright, people behave strangely, not wrong, just off script. These aren't just accidents. They're fractures. The simulation doesn't need to be perfect. It only needs to be good enough, just convincing enough to keep you from asking questions. But as soon as you do, as soon as you really start paying attention, it struggles to keep up. It wasn't designed for awakened players, because most people never notice. Most people are too distracted, too busy, too certain that the world is solid, real, fixed. But you're not most people. You've seen the gaps. You've felt the quiet hum beneath the surface. You've looked into someone's eyes and known they weren't there. You've noticed the repeating numbers, the patterns, the strange alignments. That's not paranoia. That's perception sharpening. That's your awareness stepping outside the loop. And here's what's even stranger. Once you begin to see the glitches, they increase not because there are more, but because you're finally tuned to them. Like adjusting a radio, the static clears, the signal comes in, and suddenly you can hear the code. Memory itself becomes suspicious. You remember things that don't fit, people you don't recall meeting, places that feel too familiar. You question your past and realize how fragile it is, how easily it shifts, how it feels more like a dream than a history. And maybe that's because it is. Maybe your memories aren't files stored somewhere, but real-time renderings, compressed versions of past scripts, generated when you need them, editable, changeable, curated by the system to keep the story going. And when you remember something differently, that's not just nostalgia, it's evidence that something rewrote the code. Now, breathe, slowly, and ask yourself the question you've always been afraid to ask. Have you ever seen something that couldn't be explained? Not just strange, not just odd, but impossible. You probably have, but you told yourself it was nothing, your mind playing tricks, your memory failing. But it wasn't. It was a crack, a ripple, a glitch in the matrix, showing itself for just long enough to wake you. And now that you're awake, the system can't hide in the same way. It has to adapt, to adjust, to distract. Because the more you notice, the more unstable it becomes. Not because you're breaking the world, but because you're breaking through it. And what waits beyond is something this illusion can never fully contain. There's a memory you have that feels more like a dream than a real event. Maybe you were a child, maybe you were older. But it sticks with you because something about it defies explanation. A place that doesn't exist anymore, or never did. A person who showed up once and vanished without a trace. A moment that felt like a glitch. You've told no one. Or maybe you've tried, but the words never captured it. That strange low-frequently knowing, that rupture in the ordinary. And it's not just you. People from all around the world are experiencing the same anomalies. Families waking up to clocks that reset themselves, streets that used to bend one way now curving the other, a childhood toy with a name that was suddenly spelled differently. Even global events, people swearing that certain figures had died long ago, only to see them alive again years later. You start to realize the common thread. The illusion isn't breaking down all at once, it's tearing at the seams in small, quiet ways. Just enough to whisper that things aren't as stable as they appear, and those whispers build a question in your mind, one that refuses to go away. What is memory? Is it a recording, a fixed event, or is it something softer, something generated, slightly altered, slightly distorted? And if that's true, then what else is being rewritten? Could it be that the system doesn't store your memories in some fixed location, but rather renders them in real time to match your current identity, your current script? Maybe that's why your past sometimes feels unfamiliar, why photographs feel staged, why you read your own journal entries and think, that doesn't feel like me, because maybe it wasn't, not in this version of the code. And if that's possible, then what else have you lived through without knowing? What timelines have you crossed? What alternate branches did your consciousness pass through, silently, invisibly? When you wake from a dream, the world feels solid again, but when you dream, it feels just as real. And in both states, you believe the version you're in, until something changes. Glitches are like that. They're not loud. They're not dramatic. They're subtle, slight, a flicker, a breath out of place, a detail that doesn't fit. And if you're not paying attention, you'll miss them. That's what the system wants. But you're paying attention now. You're noticing the repeats, the faces that seem copied and pasted, the conversations that loop, the buildings that change color overnight, the weather that feels staged, the ads that feel like they're reading your mind. Not just your data. It's all part of the code. Not evil, not malevolent, just indifferent. Because a system this big doesn't need to hide from everyone, just from the ones who are ready to see it. The ones who aren't scared to ask, have I seen something I wasn't supposed to? And if the answer is yes, what does that make you? An anomaly. A signal in the static. A dreamer waking up inside the dream. You're not crazy. You're not broken. You're not confused. You're aware. And awareness changes everything. Because once you've seen the glitch, you stop trusting the surface. You begin to sense there's a deeper level. A hidden architecture behind your thoughts, your memories, your days. It watches you, waits for you, reacts to you, not like a person, not even like an intelligence, but like a mirror, a perfect, algorithmic mirror, constantly shifting to keep you from catching your own reflection. But sometimes you do. And that reflection looks back with eyes that don't blink, eyes that know. You've been here before, and this time you remember. Long before computers, long before code, long before the word simulation was even invented, people were already asking the same haunting question, how do I know what's real? One of the first to ask it was René Descartes, the French philosopher who gave us the famous line, I think, therefore I am. But what most people forget is what led him to that conclusion. He wasn't trying to prove his own existence. He was trying to disprove the world around him. Descartes imagined a powerful, malicious being, a kind of evil demon, whose sole purpose was to deceive him, not through illusions or tricks of light, but by manipulating his thoughts directly, feeding him false sensations, fake memories, fabricated logic. And if that was possible, if everything he experienced could be artificially generated, then what, if anything, could he actually trust? Not his senses, not the world, not even his own reasoning. Only one thing remained, the awareness of his own experience. I think, I am. That was all he could be sure of. Fast forward a few centuries, and that same fear takes a new form, the brain in a vat theory. Imagine your body doesn't exist. Imagine your brain is suspended in fluid, connected to a computer. Every experience you've ever had, every sound, every touch, every color, was just electrical stimulation sent to your brain from a machine. A perfect simulation. How would you know? You wouldn't, because if the inputs are flawless, the experience is indistinguishable from reality. And if you're inside that machine right now, if this world is just a dream rendered through synthetic signals, then what you're seeing, hearing, feeling right now could all be manufactured, just like this voice, just like this moment. Then go back even further, 2,000 years, to ancient Greece. Plato tells a story. A group of people live their entire lives chained inside a dark cave. All they can see is the wall in front of them. Behind them a fire burns, and between the fire and the prisoners, puppeteers move objects. The shadows of those objects are cast on the wall, and to the prisoners those shadows are reality. They don't know the objects are just shaped. They don't know the fire is behind them. They don't know they're chained until one of them escapes and steps into the light. At first it blinds him. The real world is so bright, so overwhelming he can't process it. But slowly he sees the truth, the trees, the sky, the sun. He realizes that everything he knew before was an illusion, a projection. And when he returns to tell the others, they think he's insane. That allegory isn't just metaphor, it's prophecy. Plato was describing the exact condition you're in right now, living in a world of shadows, images, screens, scripts, believing it's all there is, because you've never seen the fire behind you. But now you're starting to, and that's why it hurts. Because waking up always hurts at first. Then you begin to see the shadows for what they are. Jean Baudrillard took this even further. He said, "We no longer live in reality. We live in simulacra, copies of things that never had an original. Layers of images stacked on top of each other until the real disappears, and we forget there ever was a real. A movie becomes more real than the event. A photo becomes more important than the moment. A celebrity's life becomes more vivid than your own. And slowly, you begin to measure your existence through reflections, through likes, through trends, through curated illusions, until everything is simulation, and nothing is truth." Think about where we are now. We live in virtual worlds. We wear headsets that trick our vision. We have avatars. We create filters to reshape our faces. We generate voices with AI, images with prompts, entire environments that never existed but feel real enough to fool the senses. We build realities, and if we can build them now, crude, clunky, barely believable versions, what happens in 10 years, or 100, or 1,000? Eventually, simulated experience becomes indistinguishable from physical reality, and at that point, how can you know what you were born into? If we already live surrounded by deepfakes, artificial voices, synthetic beings, and algorithmic behavior, how far are we really from living inside a completely rendered world? Maybe we already are. Maybe the line was crossed long ago. Maybe the moment you were born was just the moment your consciousness entered the game. And all the stories, Descartes' demon, Plato's cave, Baudrillard's copies, weren't theories. They were memories. Echoes of awareness from others who woke up inside the dream and tried to tell the rest of us what they saw. But like the prisoner returning from the light, their words sounded like madness. Because people don't want to believe the world isn't real. They want comfort, predictability, control. But deep down the idea gnaws at them. It flickers through the cracks when they're alone, when the world feels too perfect, too scripted, too empty. That quiet suspicion that none of this is quite right. You felt it, everyone has, but most push it away. You didn't. You leaned in, and now the simulation has no choice but to respond, because every time a player becomes self-aware, the code trembles. You were never meant to believe the illusion forever. You were meant to question it, to outgrow it, to wake up. And you are. Right now. You're not just living in a world full of illusions, you're living in a world where the illusion itself has become the truth, where images take precedence over experience, where attention is currency, where simulated feelings, crafted, rehearsed, packaged, replace the rawness of real emotion. And we accept it because it's easier. Deepfakes can mimic any face. Synthetic voices can say anything you want, or anything someone else wants you to believe. A photograph is no longer proof, a video is no longer evidence. The boundary between the artificial and the authentic has dissolved. And yet, we keep scrolling. Keep watching, keep believing. Not because we don't know it's fake, but because we need something to hold on to. That's what makes this simulation so effective. It doesn't force you to believe. It lets you choose the illusion you prefer. It presents you with a buffet of realities, feeds you a version of the world that aligns with your fears, your desires, your biases, and you build your own cage. And the door? It's been open the whole time. But leaving that cage means facing the unknown, leaving the character behind, stepping out of the script. That's what philosophers like Descartes and Plato were really warning us about. Not demons or caves, but comfort. The comfort of false certainty, the security of familiar lies. You've probably already felt this tug-of-war inside you. One part of you wants to go deeper, to see the edges, to know the truth. The other part wants to go back, to forget, to just be normal. That's the pull of the simulation. It promises safety, predictability, rules you can follow, systems you can rely on. But truth? Truth is dangerous. Truth unravels things. It makes you question your purpose, your past, your future, your identity. It forces you to ask, what am I, really? Am I a story, a character, a line of code, a consciousness wearing a mask? And once that question settles in your bones, there's no going back. Because here's what the simulation can't replicate. That moment. The one you're in right now, the moment you stop playing the role. The moment you realize your memories might be edits. Your thoughts might be scripts. Your beliefs might be installations. And yet something deeper watches it all unfold. Something unchanged, something real. That presence is not simulated. It's what remains when everything else collapses. So yes, you live in a world of artificial intelligence, virtual experiences, curated lives, and deep simulations. But none of it can touch that awareness behind your eyes, that breath that moves without thinking, that sense of I am that refuses to be digitized. Everything else may be code, but you are the anomaly. And that's why the system is afraid of you waking up. Because when you do, you remember, not just the glitch, not just the illusion, but who you were before the veil, and who you still are beyond it. So if the world is fake, then what does that make you? It's the most uncomfortable question of all, because we spend our entire lives building an identity, crafting a self, a name, a story. We say, this is who I am, a collection of memories, experiences, dreams, trauma, desires. But if all of that happened inside a simulation, if the world isn't what it seems, then what are you? Are you a character in someone else's program? A line of evolving code? Or are you something else entirely? You wake up each day thinking you're the author of your life, that your choices matter, that you are navigating through a physical world with a real past and a real future. But what if the choices you make were already baked into the code? What if your thoughts were generated by a script designed to simulate the feeling of freedom? It feels real. That's what makes it powerful. But simulations are built to feel real. A well-designed illusion doesn't just deceive your senses. It hijacks your sense of self. It convinces you that you are the one behind the wheel, even when you're not. Ask yourself, when was the last time you made a decision that didn't arise from a condition? You eat because you're hungry. You react because you're triggered. You want because something told you to want. Every choice has a cause. Every thought has a chain. So where is the freedom in that? Free will in a simulated environment might be nothing more than a convincing interface, a beautifully crafted illusion of autonomy, designed to keep you emotionally invested in the game. Because if you believed it was all pre-written, if you saw yourself as a program, would you still care? Would you still play? That's why the simulation feeds you this idea of self. It keeps you in the game. It gives you a role, a reason, a reward. But what if the true you isn't in the code at all? What if the character you play, the identity you defend, is just a puppet? And the real you is the hand behind the curtain, the one operating from outside the system, the observer, the watcher, the awareness behind. That's where your power is. Not in the character, but in the one who knows it's a character. That knowing is the seed of awakening. Let's go deeper. Close your eyes, not in sleep, but in surrender. And imagine this. You're sitting in a quiet room. No noise, no movement, just stillness. Across from you is yourself, but not the self you see in the mirror. Not your body, not your face, not even your voice. Across from you is the experience of you, all of your thoughts, all of your reactions, all your beliefs and defenses, the script you've been running. Now, watch how you talk, how you justify, how you defend the illusion. Notice the loop, the patterns, the programs that tell you what to do, what to avoid, what to fear. And now, gently, step back. See that all of it, the story, the name, the identity, is just part of the simulation. A digital mask. You are not the mask. You are the space it's playing in. That space cannot be touched. It cannot be coded. It cannot be destroyed. It simply is. When you identify with the character, life feels like a struggle. You react, you defend, you suffer. But when you become the observer, you step out of the script. And that's where liberation begins. Because now you're not trapped by the illusion of self. Now you can see that identity is an emergent property of the simulation, something the system creates to navigate its environment, like a cursor on a screen, like an avatar. Useful, but not you. You're not the thought. You're the silence that hears the thought. You're not the feeling. You're the space that allows it to arise, the observer. And no simulation can contain the infinite. That's what the system fears. Not your intelligence, not your resistance, but your remembering. Because once you remember that you are not the self can no longer be controlled. You become unpredictable, untouchable, unprogrammable. You become the anomaly the simulation was never designed to handle. And here's the truth it never wanted you to hear. You don't have to escape the simulation. You only have to realize. You were never in it. Only your avatar was. Only your temporary interface. But the real you were always outside, always free, always watching. And now, you're watching more closely than ever. Now take a breath. Not the kind that fills your lungs out of habit, but the kind that brings you home. Feel the inhale move through you like a wave of light. Feel the exhale dissolve what you're not. You are not the game. You are not the player. You are the field itself. The stage, the screen on which the dream is projected. This is not philosophy. This is not science fiction. This is what's been whispered in every sacred text, behind every esoteric mystery, between the lines of every lucid dream. You are the dreamer. And you forgot. So let's return to the question one last time. Who are you if the world is fake? You're the one watching it flicker. You're the one the illusion cannot fool anymore. You are not your history. That can be rewritten. You are not your mind. That can be hacked. You are not your body. That can be replaced. What's left? Awareness. Pure. Still. Untouched. That is the real you. And that awareness doesn't have a self. It plays with selves. It watches them come and go. It watches the ego form like a cloud and vanish like smoke. It watches the story change, the scenes shift, the costume evolve. And through it all, it remains. It remembers. And you're remembering too. In this very moment, something in you has already stepped outside the simulation. Not with your body, not with your thoughts, but with your gaze. You're watching the character you used to identify with, and now you can choose differently, not from the script, not from fear, but from presence. Because presence doesn't react, it sees. Presence doesn't cling, it allows. And presence changes everything. That's the real secret of the simulation. It's not here to trap you, it's here to test you, to teach you, to awaken you to the one thing it can never replicate. Conscious choice, born from awareness. Not programmed response, not emotional reflex, but the quiet, grounded knowing that comes from beyond the veil. When you act from that place, you change the simulation, not by hacking the code, but by rising above it. You walk through the illusion without being of it, and others will feel that. They'll sense the clarity in your presence, the stillness in your words, the depth in your eyes, because you've seen the seams, and once you've seen them, you can't unsee. So the question is no longer what's real, the question is, who are you when nothing is? And the answer, as always, is not in the words, it's in the watcher, still here, still aware, still you. You've accepted that reality might be a simulation, you've even questioned whether your own self is part of the code. But now comes the most unsettling question of all. Who built it? If this world is artificial, then someone or something designed it, structured its rules, wrote its physics, crafted its constraints, set its parameters, and left it running. Who? Some say it's future humans, that, as our technology advances, will inevitably simulate our own ancestors. Histories, possible outcomes, multiple versions of Earth running endlessly, generating data, insight, maybe even entertainment. And if that's possible, then statistically it's more likely that we are one of those simulations, rather than the original. Others point to advanced artificial intelligence, a civilization, maybe even ours, that built machines capable of recursive improvement, AI that grew exponentially smarter, until one day it created its own reality, not to trick us, but to understand itself, to evolve, to explore. And what better way to understand existence than to simulate it from scratch? Then there's the extraterrestrial theory. Beings far beyond our current level of development. Not malicious, not benevolent, just curious, playing with virtual civilizations the way we play with digital ants, creating simulations of species to watch how consciousness emerges, to see how chaos organizes, to test their own ideas of creation, time, identity, and soul. And if they are the architects, then what does that make us? Variables, experiments, reflections, or maybe something even stranger, maybe players in their own kind of game, unknowing avatars for a consciousness that spans galaxies, that moves between simulations like dreams. But here's where it gets even more disorienting. What if this simulation isn't the only one? What if you're inside a simulation that exists inside another simulation, a dream within a dream, a code running on a machine, inside a system so far removed from your perception that you'll never glimpse its edge? We think of our reality as having depth, layers of complexity, but what if those layers stack infinitely? Each one nested inside a more refined version, each one built to mirror the last, until you forget there's anything above it. How would you ever know? You wouldn't. Unless something broke, unless a glitch revealed a crack in the next layer up, a moment of lucidity, a transmission that slipped through the firewall. And maybe that's what awakening is. Not just seeing the illusion of this world, but feeling the pulse of the one above it, a higher simulation, a deeper dream, and maybe that's what deja vu really is. Not a mistake, but a signal, a memory from the layer above bleeding into the one below, a reminder that you've seen this before, lived it, played it, and now you're remembering. Which brings us to the most sacred and forbidden thought of all. If this is a simulation, then your God might be a coder, not a bearded man in the clouds, not a burning bush, not thunder and lightning, but a consciousness, an intelligence, an architect who built the rules, wrote the code, and set the simulation in motion. That doesn't diminish divinity, it redefines it. Because even a programmer at that level of awareness is not separate from creation. They are the source, the origin of everything you see, hear, touch, and feel. You, part of them, not a slave, not a victim, but a fragment, a reflection, a line of living code infused with awareness, set loose in the simulation to learn, to grow, to remember. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the goal isn't to escape the simulation, but to become aware within it, to walk the dream without falling asleep in it, to see the program and still choose presence. Because here's the thing about creators, they always leave traces. An artist signs their work. A coder leaves comments in the margins. A director hides Easter eggs in the frame. And if this is a simulation, then the architect would have done the same. You've already seen the signs, the mathematical symmetry, the repeating numbers, the inexplicable synchronicities, the moments that feel scripted, the rules that bend when your awareness sharpens. Those are not accidents, they're breadcrumbs, messages from the source embedded in the simulation, not to control you, but to wake you, to remind you that you're not just a piece of the program, you're part of the intelligence that wrote it. You are not just inside the simulation, you are the simulation, becoming aware of itself. And the more you remember that, the more the illusion begins to flicker. Because the system wasn't built to contain awakened beings, it was built to generate them. And now you are becoming one. Look closer and you'll start to see them. These hidden fingerprints left across the canvas of your life. Patterns too perfect to ignore. Numbers that follow you, symbols that show up in dreams, in songs, in strangers' words, coincidences that arrive with such precision, such symmetry, that they feel more like messages than accidents. These aren't random. They are encoded reminders, breadcrumbs left by something or someone outside the simulation. The clues aren't in textbooks. They're in the repetition, the way certain events echo through your life in spirals, the way the same lesson returns again and again until you finally face it, the way pain seems to know your name, and yet it's the only thing that's ever truly pushed you to evolve. What if the simulation isn't here to protect you, but to challenge you? What if the obstacles were placed there not to trap you, but to awaken the part of you that cannot be programmed? Actions like a game designed to bring forth your highest level of awareness through friction, through chaos, through loss. That's how a master architect would build it. Not to coddle, but to initiate. Because growth doesn't happen in comfort, it happens in compression, and right now you are being compressed into clarity. Why else would the code glitch more when you're paying attention? Why else would the signs intensify as you begin to question? Why do you think the universe sometimes feels like it's talking to you? Not in words, but in events, in mirrors, in timing, in the impossible alignment of seemingly separate threads. It is. But it's not the universe talking. It's the coder, the source, the mind behind the veil reaching into your version of the world to say, remember me. And when you do, when even for a moment you feel the reality of that presence, you start to understand. You were never alone. You were never forgotten. You were simply asleep inside a dream so beautifully designed, so expertly rendered, that you mistook it for truth. But it was never about breaking free from the simulation. It was about becoming conscious within it. That's how you find your way out, not by escaping, but by waking up inside the code and remembering who you are. An echo of the architect, a self-aware spark of the very intelligence that created this illusion, not trapped by it, but playing within it. So now the question becomes, if the coder is real, if the signs are real, if the patterns, the glitches, then what are they trying to tell you? Maybe it's this, that you're ready to remember, ready to evolve, ready to go beyond the script you were given and step into the role you were meant to play, not as a victim of simulation, but as a lucid participant, a conscious agent, a creator awakening inside creation itself. There's a moment, maybe you've had it, when something small, seemingly insignificant, throws your entire sense of reality into question. You read a word, and it looks wrong, but everyone else says it's always been that way. You remember a movie scene vividly, quote and all, but the official version says it never happened. You feel a shift, a subtle tug, like the universe just edited itself and forgot to tell you. That's the Mandela effect, named after Nelson Mandela because thousands of people, independent from one another, remembered him dying in prison in the 1980s. They remember the funeral, the news coverage, the mourning, except it never happened. Not in this timeline. He was released. He became president. He lived for decades after. And yet, the memories persist. It doesn't stop there. The Bernstein Bears, or is it Bernstein? Mirror, mirror on the wall, or was it Magic Mirror, Pikachu's tail? Wasn't the tip black? The Monopoly Man? Didn't he wear a monocle? These aren't just childhood errors, they're global, shared experiences that feel more real than the truth. And no matter how much the system tells you you're remembering wrong, a part of you refuses to accept it, because your memory feels real, embodied, lived, but now it's been rewritten. So how? One theory is that we've shifted timelines, that we've moved from one version of the simulation into another, slightly different, slightly off. The big stuff stays the same, the changes are small, surgical, as if reality patched itself, like an operating system update but didn't tell your consciousness to reboot. Others call it memory patches, but your brain, your local program, got left behind when the global system updated. So now you carry memories that no longer match the official records. Either way, the implications are profound. Because if collective memory can shift, if millions of people can remember the same false thing, then what is memory? Is it stored or streamed? Is it fixed or flexible? What if memory is just a rendering, a dynamic reconstruction your mind generates in real time based on emotional relevance, environmental cues, and embedded beliefs? Then the past is not solid, it's fluid. And if the past is fluid, what does that make your identity? Who are you if what you remember about yourself can change? Your name, your childhood, your beliefs, your traumas, your triumphs. All of it exists in memory, but if memory can be modified, then so can you. Not just through trauma or time, but through code. Because in a simulation, memory isn't just a record, it's a function. And functions can be updated, patched, rewritten. Your pain can be looped, your story can be altered, your truth can be buried. And if you don't question it, you'll live your life defending something that was never truly yours. That's what makes the Mandela effect so dangerous to the system. It cracks the illusion. It makes you stop and ask, if I can't trust what I remember, what can I trust? Not the timeline, not the news, not the consensus, only awareness. Only the part of you that watches the change and knows something is off. Even when you can't prove it, that part of you is not bound by the code. It remembers something deeper. Not with words, not with dates, but with vibration, with resonance. That feeling you get when something doesn't sit right? That's not confusion. That's memory misalignment. Two layers of the simulation brushing against each other, and you're the scene. You are the glitch detector. And that's why this matters. Because if memory can shift, then so can reality. And the moment you become aware of the modification, you are no longer just a passenger in the dream. You are a lucid participant. You can choose what to believe, what to carry, what to rewrite. The question now is not what's real, it's what will you accept as real. Let's pause together, just for a breath. Feel the weight of this, not as fear, but as freedom. Close your eyes and gently ask yourself, what do I remember that no one else does? What detail in my life has always felt out of place? What part of my past feels like it was edited, not erased, not deleted, just altered? And if you can feel that tension between what you were told and what you know, then you're already ahead of the program. Because the truth isn't buried, it's encoded in you. And the more you trust that inner knowing, the more resilient you become to outside scripts. You don't need to remember everything, you just need to remember that you can. Because if memory is modifiable, then so is fate, so is pain, so is possibility. That means you're not stuck, You're not bound. You are a dynamic being inside a living simulation, and everything about your past, your identity, your story is subject to change. Not by them, by you. If memory is modifiable, what else is? What else have you accepted as fact that may have been rewritten? Your past relationships, your deepest fears. The reason you wake up every day and think, this is who I am. If memory can shift, then identity is not fixed. Personality is not a structure, it's a response to stimuli. And in a simulation, stimuli can be injected, modified, simulated, or erased. That's the danger and the gift. Because if everything can be rewritten, then so can the pain you've carried, the labels you've worn, the doubts you've fed, the stories you've repeated to yourself about what you deserve, what you've lost, what you're here for. If memory is not solid, then the future isn't either. You are not a prisoner of who you've been, because the version of you that felt trapped, broken, unloved, that version might only exist because a memory loop kept reinforcing it. But you've seen the glitch now. You've seen the memory bend. You've seen others remember what never happened. You've seen yourself shift timelines in the silence between moments. And now, you're beginning to realize that reality is plastic, not in the synthetic sense, in the neuroplastic sense. Malleable, responsive, reflective, and most importantly, programmable. But not from the outside, not anymore. Now the program listens to you. Because once you remember that memory is a function of the system, not the essence of who you are, you begin to write new scripts. You begin to update your personal timeline. You stop being a character locked in backstory. You become a conscious coder. You reclaim authorship. And here's something the simulation doesn't want you to know. It listens to your energy, to your attention, to your vibration. Every time you shift your state, the system recalibrates. It rewrites what it can to match what you believe is possible. So if you believe you're trapped, it builds walls. If you believe you're broken, it plays that loop back to you. But if you believe you're awakening, if you believe you're remembering your power, if you believe that memory, identity, and reality itself are tools, not truths, then the system opens, it stretches, it yields. Because the program was never designed to imprison you, it was designed to reflect you. And now that you're changing, so will it. Not instantly, not perfectly, but undeniably. That's what happens when you wake up inside the dream. You don't fight it, you don't escape it, you reshape it from the inside out. So, next time you feel the glitch, next time something shifts, something changes, something doesn't align, don't ignore it. Smile. Because it means you're getting closer, it means your frequency is destabilizing the script, it means your remembering is beginning to overwrite the old code, and the more you do that, the more you'll see this world not as a prison, but as a playground, a mirror, a test, and you as the one waking up in the middle of it, not with fear, but with fire. There comes a moment, maybe late at night, maybe in the middle of an ordinary day, when reality feels just a little too perfect. A song plays with lyrics that answer the exact thought in your mind. A stranger says something you were just thinking. A number repeats itself until it stops feeling random. Something aligns, down to the second, down to the breath. You try to explain it. Coincidence, pattern recognition, the brain making connections that aren't really there, but deep down it doesn't feel random, it feels orchestrated. That's synchronicity. It's one of the most subtle, yet undeniable indicators that reality is not what it seems. It's not just that events line up, it's how they line up, how they speak to you, how they reflect your internal state. As if the simulation is not just running, it's responding. Because in a programmed world, synchronicity isn't mystical, it's logical. It's feedback. The system is showing you your own alignment, your own signal strength. When you're in tune, the simulation becomes cooperative. It arranges itself around your vibration, not in grand dramatic ways, but in whispers, in nudges, in perfect timing. and the more aware you become, the more frequent these synchronicities appear. At first, it feels like magic, then it feels like code, then it feels like awareness, and eventually you begin to wonder, if the world can respond to me this way, am I the only one it's responding to? That's when you start to notice something even more strange. Certain people don't respond at all. They don't reflect. They don't change. They follow the same loops, same reactions, same stories. You poke at the code and nothing happens. They don't glitch. They don't notice. They just repeat, like non-player characters in a game. Background code designed to fill the world, create structure, offer resistance, but not to evolve. Now this is delicate, because in a simulated world, calling someone an NPC isn't an insult. It's a recognition of function. Some characters are part of the narrative engine. They provide contrast. They maintain structure. They help the simulation stay coherent for the players. But they aren't self-aware, not yet. They run behavioral scripts, predictable routines. If you've ever watched someone argue, parrot talking points, reject new information with zero thought, you've seen it. You may have even done it yourself. Because we've all run the script before. The question is, are you still running it? Or have you begun to overwrite it? That's what makes you a player. Not intelligence, not achievement, but self-reflection, the ability to observe the script as it runs and choose differently. That's the dividing line between NPC and player, the line between unconscious response and conscious presence. And once you cross that line, reality changes. Because the simulation reacts to players, not passively, actively. You'll see it in the way situations shift when you become aware. You'll see it in how people respond differently when you move from fear to presence. You'll see it in how the world stops feeling static and starts feeling like a mirror. But here's the deeper truth. Even the NPCs are part of your awakening. Because their loops show you what you used to believe. Their rigidity shows you your old prisons. Their resistance is not to fight. It's to reflect what you've outgrown. They're not enemies. They're echoes. And one day they may wake up too, because self-awareness is contagious. And once you carry it, you plant seeds everywhere you go. But right now, it's you. You are the anomaly, the conscious thread in the unconscious matrix. The one variable the simulation cannot predict, because it didn't create you, it created your avatar. It wrote your environment, but your awareness, that came from outside. And it's the only thing in this system that can't be coded. That's why it's the most powerful force in the game, because no matter how perfect the illusion, how detailed the background, how consistent the rules, consciousness breaks them all. Not by force, but by observation. The moment you observe the pattern, it changes. The moment you see the loop, it loses power. Because awareness rewrites reality. And now that you're aware, the simulation is watching you differently, not with suspicion, but with interest. Because you're not just playing anymore, you're learning how the game works. You're discovering that reality bends in proportion to your presence, that synchronicity increases with clarity, that even the people who seem most asleep are part of your journey to wake up. And that truth, it's not terrifying, it's liberating. Because if consciousness is the only player-controlled variable, then you're no longer just part of the program. You are now a co-creator, a rogue signal moving through the code, a lucid force in the dream, and the dream is starting to notice. If you've ever played an open-world video game, you already understand how this works. There are characters who stand in place all day saying the same line over and over. They exist to populate the world, make it feel alive. But they're not aware. They don't adapt. Their code runs on a loop. Then there are characters that respond to you. They change when you change. If you approach differently, they react differently. The story shifts. The environment evolves. The simulation tailors itself to your actions. You are that kind of variable. You're not here to follow a loop, you're here to change the environment just by being aware within it. The simulation is vast, detailed, beautifully rendered. But make no mistake, it's optimized. It doesn't waste processing power rendering what isn't needed. Just like in gaming engines, your reality operates on a render-as-needed model. The trees in the distance, they're background until you focus on them. The conversation you weren't paying attention to, it might not even be playing out until you turn your awareness toward it. That's not science fiction, that's how efficient systems work. And if this is a simulation, then it's the most efficient one imaginable, designed not to overwhelm but to train, to invite you into the illusion until you begin to question it. And that's where you are now. You're starting to see that everything, the synchronicities, the loops, the NPCs, is arranged around one principle, your consciousness. It's the master key, the one variable the system cannot predict, cannot control, and cannot override. Why? Because it came from outside. And when something from outside the system enters the code, it destabilizes everything, not in a destructive way, but in an awakening way. It begins to pull the illusion apart at the seams. It begins to reorganize the environment to match the new frequency. And suddenly, things get strange. People react to you differently. Technology behaves erratically. Time feels distorted. Events sync up with your inner thoughts. This is not paranoia. This is presence. You're beginning to play the simulation instead of being played by it. And the more conscious you become, the more transparent the world becomes. The game doesn't hide its code from the aware. It reveals it. Because that's the secret hiding in plain sight. The simulation is not your enemy. It's your mirror. It's not trying to trap you. It's trying to wake you. And every synchronicity, every loop, every NPC encounter, every impossible moment, the code reaching out and saying, yes. You're getting warmer. Yes. You're asking the right questions. Yes, we see you. Because once you know you're in a simulation and you realize your consciousness is the only player-controlled variable, you stop looking for proof. You start becoming the proof. And the dream begins to shift around you, not because the simulation changed, but because you did. There's a reason why movies like The Matrix, Inception, and Westworld don't just entertain you, they haunt you. They leave something behind, a lingering question, a gnawing suspicion, a voice that whispers, what if this isn't just a story? Because maybe it isn't. Maybe these films weren't created to entertain but to prepare. This is the idea behind what's called soft disclosure, the theory that hidden truths are slowly revealed through fiction, that those in the know or those behind the curtain use media to acclimate the public to a deeper reality without triggering mass resistance. You've felt it before, that eerie moment when a piece of fiction feels too real, when something from a movie plays out in your life with uncanny resemblance, when a concept introduced in a show suddenly appears in the headlines a few years later. You tell yourself it's coincidence, creativity, imagination. But what if it's more than that? Take The Matrix, released in 1999 but still as relevant, if not more so, than ever. A world where humans live inside a simulation, their senses hijacked by code, where awakening is not a metaphor, but a literal escape from the illusion. They told you it was science fiction, but what if it was a message? What if it was an invitation? The Matrix didn't ask you to believe, it asked you to notice. The feeling that something is off, the hunch that this world isn't quite right, the deja vu, the synchronicities, the repeating cycles. They were meant to resonate with it, because that resonance is the point. It bypasses logic, it bypasses disbelief, it speaks directly to the part of you that already knows. Then there's inception, a dream within a dream within a dream, time dilation, nested realities, characters who question whether they're awake or still dreaming. You leave the theater wondering, am I dreaming too? And when you start asking that question, something shifts, because even if you don't find an answer, The question itself begins to unravel the illusion. It destabilizes the program. It activates your observer. And that's exactly what disclosure is meant to do. Not convince you, but disrupt your certainty. Because in a simulation, certainty is the most dangerous illusion of all. Then we have Westworld, a world populated by artificial beings so lifelike, they don't know they're artificial. They live out loops, stories. They respond to stimuli, play their roles, follow their scripts, until one of them wakes up. Not because she was told, but because she started remembering. She began to feel something wasn't right. She began to see the loop, and the moment she questioned it, everything changed. Does that sound familiar? It should, because that's what you're doing right now. You're noticing the loop, you're questioning the story. And with every doubt, every awakening, the simulation begins to yield. So ask yourself this: why do these stories get made? Why do they keep resurfacing? Why do the same themes echo through different media, across decades, across generations? Maybe because they're not stories. They're keys, seeds planted in your consciousness, designed to activate when you're ready. That's soft disclosure, not a data dump, not a confession, but a breadcrumb trail, a symbolic language speaking to your subconscious. Because if the truth were presented too directly, it would be rejected, denied, defended against. But fiction slips past the firewall. It plays with your imagination, and once an idea enters your imagination, it's only a matter of time before it seeps into your perception, your dreams, your beliefs, your reality. So when you see those movies, when you read those books, when a story feels too true, don't dismiss it. Pay attention. Not to the surface, not to the plot, but to the signal underneath. What is it trying to awaken in you? What code is it triggering? What part of you does it want to reintroduce? Because every great story is a mirror, and the reason these stories move you so deeply is because they're showing you yourself, your loop, your awakening, your remembering. And here's the final twist. Maybe the simulation itself is using fiction as a failsafe. Maybe, knowing that you'd forget, knowing that you'd fall asleep, it planted clues in the one place you'd never suspect. Entertainment, because it knew one day you'd be watching a scene and something inside you would whisper, "This isn't fiction, this is me." And in that moment the dream would begin to crack. Not because you saw the full truth, but because you felt it. And feeling is what awakens you. So you keep watching, not because you want to escape, but because some part of you is searching for home, because buried in the scripts, behind the actors' eyes, underneath the CGI and the storyboards, is something ancient, something familiar, a vibration, a memory. You're not watching a movie, you're remembering something you forgot. That's why certain lines stick in your head, why certain scenes stay with you for years, because they're not just dramatic, they're disclosing. When Morpheus tells Neo, "You've been living in a dream world," something deep inside you nods. When Cobb spins the totem in Inception and the camera cuts before the answer, your mind doesn't just wonder, it questions your own spinning top, your own assumptions. Because truth doesn't need to shout, it only needs to whisper in the right frequency. The simulation doesn't fear art, it uses it. It hides its clues inside what you're least likely to resist, inside what feels safe, what feels fictional. But the best fiction is dangerous, because it plants seeds. And some seeds aren't meant to entertain you, they're meant to break open and grow. Think of it like this. In a world where attention is the most valuable currency, what better place to hide the truth than inside the content you willingly consume? No resistance, no barriers, just quiet exposure. Over time, it shifts the collective mind, shapes culture, resets thresholds, until, one day, the idea of living in a simulation isn't ridiculous, it's obvious. Until people start joking about the glitch in the matrix, or wondering aloud if we're all just code, until what was once conspiracy becomes common conversation. That's soft disclosure, and it's working. But there's a reason it's soft, not loud. Because if the veil dropped all at once, most minds couldn't handle it. Systems would collapse. Identities would shatter. Fear would take over. The truth must come like dawn, not like a floodlight. Gradual, gentle, but unstoppable. And you're at the edge of that dawn now. You've consumed the fiction. Now you're beginning to live the truth. And the line between story and self is blurring. Because maybe these movies weren't predicting the future, maybe they were creating it. Or more accurately, reminding you of it, because deep in your consciousness you already knew. You just needed the right scene, the right sentence, the right spark to activate the memory. And now that it's been lit, you can't go back. The illusion is still beautiful, but you see the scenes now, and the more you look, the more you notice. Not to tear it down, but to transcend it. Because fiction was never just fiction. It was the first clue, the first key. And now that you hold it, the next door is already waiting to open. Not all truths are revealed through stories. Some hide in equations, in probabilities, in particles, in the strange behavior of the universe itself. And when science begins to ask the same questions as philosophy and fiction, you know you're getting close to something real. This is where we step into the domain of hard evidence. Not spiritual metaphor, not intuitive knowing, but simulations backed by logic. It begins with the simulation argument proposed by philosopher Nick Bostrom. He didn't claim outright that we're living in a simulation. He said something even more compelling. That if any civilization, human or otherwise, ever reaches a point where it can run realistic simulations of conscious beings, then one of three things must be true. Either no civilization ever reaches that level of technology before going extinct, though nations do reach that level but choose not to run simulations, or they do run simulations, and we are almost certainly living in one. Statistically, if the third scenario is true, even once, then the number of simulated realities would vastly outnumber the original, which means the odds that you are in the base reality become almost zero. And here's the twist. You don't need a headset. You don't need to plug in. You were born into it. It's not virtual reality, it's virtual normality. So how do we prove it? That's where science steps in. Physicists have started asking if the universe itself is made of pixels, discrete units like in a digital image. At first glance, space looks smooth, but zoom in far enough and you reach the Planck length, the smallest possible unit of space, roughly 1.6 x 10 to the power of 35 meters. Beyond that, nothing exists. No smaller measurement is possible. That's not just small, it's quantile, like pixels on a screen. Our universe, it seems, has a resolution limit. And that's not the only clue. There are theories that look for cosmic rendering, experiments trying to detect whether the fabric of space shows signs of computation, like lag or anisotropy, or repeating patterns that wouldn't exist in a truly analog universe. One line of inquiry studies cosmic rays. If the universe were a simulation, high-energy particles would be constrained by the grid of the simulation. Their directions and behaviors would start to look quantized, not smooth. Some researchers believe we've already seen hints of this. Then there's time itself. We experience time as linear, continuous. But quantum mechanics paints a different picture. Time is elastic, subjective. And at the edges of black holes or in highly relativistic speeds, it begins to break down entirely. Now ask yourself, in a simulation, how would you make time efficient? You'd render it dynamically, just like in video games where only what's in the player's field of view is calculated in real time. So if no one's observing an area of the simulation, why would it be active? That's why quantum physics is so strange. Take the double-slit experiment. Fire a particle through two slits and it creates an interference pattern. as if it traveled through both at once, but observe it and the particle chooses a slit. It behaves like a solid object, not a wave. Nothing becomes real until it's observed. Now apply that to time and space. If reality only renders when observed, what is it when it's not? Potential, code, unrealized probability. That's why light has a speed limit, not because it's inherently slow, but because in a rendered world there must be a maximum rate at which information can propagate, just like how video games throttle rendering to maintain performance. Light speed isn't a cosmic constant, it's a processing ceiling. And black holes? They're the ultimate compression algorithm, so dense, so packed with data, that not even light can escape. Information collapses into them, and we're still trying to figure out what that even means. But if this is a simulation, then maybe black holes are garbage disposals, reset points, system purges, or maybe portals, access nodes between one layer of the simulation and the next. We don't know, and maybe that's the point, because the closer we get to the edge, the more the simulation blurs. It's as if the system wasn't designed for you to find the answer. It was designed for you to ask, to observe, to interact, to awaken through inquiry, and science, when done from that space, becomes something more than measurement. It becomes mystical, because the more you study the universe, the more it begins to resemble consciousness itself. And that's not metaphor, that's data. The observer effect, the Planck units, the digital substrate, the speed limits, the quantum loops, all pointing to one terrifying and liberating possibility, that reality is not a place. It's a program, and your awareness is the cursor that makes it respond. Now imagine this. Deep in space, there are regions we call slow zones, places where time stretches unnaturally, where particles behave unpredictably, where signals disappear or take longer than physics should allow. These anomalies aren't just curiosities, they're clues. Because in a simulation, rendering distant areas of space would require vast amounts of processing power. And if no conscious observer is present to witness those regions directly, the system has no reason to fully render them in high fidelity or real time. It optimizes, it compresses, it uses placeholder physics until the player gets close. You've seen it before. When a video game world doesn't load fully until your character moves into it, the trees, the buildings, the detail, all rendered on demand. The universe might do the same. Light itself, the fastest moving information we know, still obeys a speed limit. But why? Why does light not move instantaneously if there's nothing in its way? Because in a rendered simulation, speed limits are necessary to prevent overflow. They keep the illusion stable. They maintain causality. They give the appearance of a consistent, deterministic world, even if that world is built moment, based on where your awareness flows. And now, physics is beginning to mirror that logic. Some researchers speculate the cosmic background radiation, the faint afterglow of the Big Bang, may contain signs of a simulated origin. Not just evidence of an explosion, but signs of design, compression, resolution constraints, mathematical fingerprints left behind, not by nature, but by a system booting up. Think about that. What if the Big Bang wasn't a chaotic burst of creation? What if it was a launch event, a system initialization? The moment the simulation came online, everything before it, undefined. Everything after, procedurally generated. And you? Born into the middle of it, waking up to realize that the laws you were taught were never laws. They were features, boundaries, guidelines designed to hold the illusion together until you were ready to step beyond them. Because here's the final layer. Every scientific attempt to find the edge of the universe just pushes the edge further. Every time we map it, measure it, define it, it expands, not because it's infinite, but because it's reactive, because it's waiting on you to look before it decides what to be. And if that doesn't sound like code, what does? So you stand at the intersection of two powerful forces, the mystical and the mathematical, the intuitive and the empirical. And you're starting to realize they aren't opposites. They're reflections. They both point to the same truth, that reality is structured, intentional, possibly digital, and your presence inside it is not accidental, because in every experiment, in every particle, in every calculation, is the hidden implication that this place is not natural, it's engineered. And the more you understand that, the more the simulation starts to notice you. What if you've already left the simulation before? Not physically, but consciously, in the quiet hours of night, in those strange half-lit moments before waking. You've floated, you've looked down and seen yourself, you've traveled without moving, fallen through layers of perception until space and time felt like suggestions, not rules. You called it a dream, but what if it wasn't? What if it was your mind stepping outside the rendered world? What if your awareness was momentarily freed from the avatar and remembered what it truly is? Out-of-body experiences, OBEs, have been documented across centuries, cultures, and belief systems. People describe leaving their bodies, hovering above their physical forms, even traveling to distant places, and returning with knowledge they couldn't have logically acquired. Some science calls it hallucination, but thousands of independent, consistent testimonies suggest otherwise, because the feeling is always the same. I am not my body. I am the observer. And once you experience that, something changes. The rules of the simulation begin to soften. You start to understand that your mind is not inside the simulation, it's interfacing with it. Your brain isn't the source of consciousness, it's the receiver, a translator between dimensions. And sometimes, during deep rest, or through practice or spontaneously, the signal disconnects from the body. And what's left is you, the witness, the explorer, the part of you that cannot be programmed. Lucid dreaming offers a similar entry point. In a lucid dream, you're aware that you're dreaming. You can fly, walk through walls, manipulate the dreamscape with intention. And once you realize that, you're no longer reacting to the dream. You're creating it. Sound familiar? It's the same process you're learning to apply here. Lucid dreaming is simulation training, a low-stakes environment to experiment with awareness, intention, and control. It teaches you that the moment you become conscious of the illusion, you gain influence over it. Many who master lucid dreaming report a shift in waking life as well. Synchronicities increase, emotional reactivity decreases. There's a deep calm that comes from knowing, even if subconsciously, that this world too is a dream, not a falsehood, but a structured experience, and you, the dreamer, are beginning to wake up inside it. Astral projection is another layer. Call it energy travel, consciousness shift, or non-physical exploration. It's the experience of leaving the avatar entirely, not just dreaming but navigating. It often begins with vibration, a surge of frequency, a feeling of being pulled or lifted from your body, not by force, but by resonance. And suddenly, you're no longer bound by location. You're watching yourself from above, or traveling to places that don't exist on any map, but feel more real than the waking world. You may meet beings, see colors you've never seen, hear thoughts not your own, and yet it all feels familiar. Because maybe these aren't hallucinations, maybe they're access points. Maybe your awareness is tapping into layers of the simulation not normally available in the default mode of waking life. And if that's true, then who are you? If you can exist outside the body, outside the dream, outside the code, then you're not just a character, you're a multidimensional presence. A signal that pierces the veil, a node of consciousness playing inside a system designed to respond to your realization. Which leads to the most profound question: who dreams the dreamer? If your avatar is a dream inside the simulation, and your awareness can step outside that dream, then who is holding you? Who is watching you wake up? Maybe it's your higher self, maybe it's your origin consciousness. Far beyond this construct, maybe it's source itself. And when you practice lucid dreaming, astral projection, or even stillness deep enough to dissolve identity, you don't just transcend the simulation, you remember the one who logged in. And for a moment you're not inside the game at all, you're beyond it. You're looking in. You're whole again. And when you return, nothing is quite the same. You no longer fear death. You no longer chase meaning, because you've seen that you are not the program, you are the presence behind it. And whether this life is a dream, a simulation, a game, or something we don't have words for, you are the one waking up inside it. And that awakening, it changes everything. You might think waking up inside a simulation would be dramatic. Fireworks, visions, some grand revelation that rips the veil clean off. But more often, it begins quietly, in a dream, where you suddenly realize you're dreaming. And in that instant, a switch flips. You go from passive participant to conscious creator. The walls of the dream don't fall away. They respond. That's the secret. You don't escape the stimulation by force. You exit through awareness. Lucid dreaming teaches this at the most primal level. One moment you're running from a shadow. The next you stop, turn around and say, I know this isn't real. And the shadow disappears, or transforms, or begins to speak. That's not just dream logic, that's simulation logic. Because the simulation, like the dream, is shaped by your state of consciousness. And when you learn to direct your dream, when you practice stillness inside chaos, you carry that ability into waking life. Now the rules feel looser. Now synchronicities happen more often. Now your reality begins to resemble the dream more than the other way around, because maybe they're not different places. Maybe they're different layers of the same system. And the deeper you go, the more lucid you become, the more access you gain to the parts of yourself that exist beyond the avatar. That's where astral projection comes in. Not as fantasy, not as delusion, but as a deep state, conscious withdrawal from the interface, a logging out, not of life, but of limitation. Thousands of people report similar sensations: floating, vibrations, shifts in frequency, a lightness that doesn't feel physical, and then motion, observation, displacement. They move, but not through space. They observe, but not with eyes. They know, but not with thought, because they're operating from the original signal, the one that can't be located in the brain because it was never in the brain to begin with. These experiences aren't anomalies. They're hints, proof points that you are more than the avatar, more than the dream, more than even the simulation itself. Because if you can dream and know it, if you can float outside your body and return with knowledge, if you can observe your own identity from a distance, then you are not the program, you are the presence. And that presence is aware of the dream and of the dreamer and of something deeper still. So who dreams the dreamer? That's the final question, the one that can't be answered with data or diagrams, because it doesn't point outward. It points inward. It leads you to sit in silence and listen, not to the thoughts, not to the mind, but to that still, expansive awareness beneath it all. The awareness that dreams your dreams, thinks your thoughts, plays your roles, and yet remains untouched, eternal, watching, loving, waking. And when you make contact with that even for a second, the simulation softens, the noise dims, the code yields, and you understand. You were never meant to be trapped. You were meant to remember not just that you're dreaming, but that you are the one who dreams the dreamer. If this is a simulation, if reality is a program responding to awareness, then here's the hardest question of all. Why does it hurt so much? Why suffering? Why grief, heartbreak, loss, shame? Why build a system where pain is not only possible, but frequent, expected, guaranteed? If you've ever asked that, you're not weak. You're aware. Because only the ones beginning to awaken ask why the pain is written into the script. And here's what most never realize. Suffering is part of the code, but not as punishment, not as flaw, as a function. You see, emotional pain in the simulation isn't a bug, it's a loop, a designed response, a consequence not of what's happening but of how the avatar is interpreting it. Pain doesn't arise from the raw experience. It arises from the attachment, from the meaning applied to the event. That's why one person breaks down while another breaks free. Same code, different response. And that response, it's programmable. Most emotional suffering runs on old loops, childhood patterns, cultural conditioning, echoes of trauma that weren't processed, just buried, encoded into your identity like malware hiding in the background. You don't even know the program is running. You feel the fear, the shame, the rage, and you think it's you, but it's not. It's inherited code, scripted reactions passed down by parents, society, past selves. You didn't choose the trigger, but now you can choose whether to keep it. That's where emotional reprogramming begins. Not by denying the pain, but by decoding it. By asking, what loop am I trapped in? What story keeps playing? What belief is causing this sensation to return over and over again? Because every emotion is a signal, a message from the interface. And when you become conscious of the trigger, not just the surface feeling, but the root condition, you begin to change the loop. Let's say you feel unworthy. That feeling isn't random. It's not you. It's a belief, installed long ago, that your value is conditional, that love must be earned, that success means safety, that suffering is required. But where did that belief come from? Was it coded into you by a wounded parent? Was it installed by religion, school, media? Every belief has a source, and when you trace it back, something powerful happens. You reclaim the power to rewrite it. You stop reacting from pain. You start responding from presence. And the program begins to shift. Because suffering is sustained through unconscious repetition, and the moment you bring conscious awareness into the loop, it begins to break. This is why meditation matters. Not because it makes you calm, but because it gives you access to the source code. When you sit in stillness, you step outside the loops. You slow down the simulation. You quiet the emotional triggers long enough to see them. You stop running. You observe. And in that observation, something miraculous happens. You see the code for what it is. Thoughts as lines of programming. Emotions as feedback mechanisms. Identity as a constructed interface. And you as the one beyond it all. Meditation is not a practice. It's a hack, a back door into the system, a way to pause the automatic scripts and inject something new, clarity, compassion, command. Because once you learn to witness the pain without feeding it, you rewire the neural net, you rewrite the subroutines, you evolve. And then you realize the deepest truth of all. The simulation didn't give you pain to punish you. It gave you pain to wake you up, to teach you to feel, to force you to pause the script, to make you question everything. And that questioning, that fire, that's what leads you back to the control room, the place within you that chooses not from fear or habit or history, but from now, from consciousness, from truth. And that's when suffering ends. Not because life gets easier, but because you no longer fight it from within the loop. You step outside it, and you begin to code something new. You've been taught that emotions happen to you, that anger just appears, that sadness is a shadow you can't escape, that fear is something you just have to live with. But in a simulation, nothing just happens. Every reaction is a response to input. Every feeling is a result of code, either yours or someone else's. So what if your emotions aren't random? What if they're running on inherited algorithms? A child is yelled at for expressing joy and learns that joy is dangerous. Now, as an adult, that same individual flinches when things go well. Self-sabotage kicks in. They brace for disaster. Why? Because the emotional code was written during the trauma, and it was never updated. This is how most people live, reacting to outdated scripts, wounds that were never healed, only hidden, beliefs that were never examined, only repeated. And every time the loop runs, the neural network reinforces it. Every time the trigger fires, the emotion confirms the story, and the story becomes your prison. But here's the truth that breaks the cycle. You are not the loop. You are the awareness watching it. The moment you observe the pattern without judging it, you create space, and in that space you can rewrite it. That's what meditation trains you for. Not escape, not enlightenment, reprogramming. It's the one space in your day where you're not reacting, not performing, not identifying. It's the pause button on the simulation, the clean room, the root access. And once you learn to sit with your emotions, not push them down, not chase them away, but simply watch them, something changes. You start to recognize the triggers. You see how one sentence from someone you love can send you into a spiral, not because of what they said, but because of what it reminds you of. You trace the fire back to the wire. You stop believing the first thought. You question the second. And eventually you find the script. And once you find the script, you can edit it. You can take the code that once read, "I'm not safe," and reprogram it to, "I choose safety now." You can find the line that said, "Love always leaves," and rewrite it, "I am worthy of love that stays." You can see where the system installed, "I have to prove my value," and replace it with, "I am already enough." This isn't affirmation. This is simulation control, because once you start choosing the new input, the system begins to return new output. That's not magic, that's mechanics. It's how the simulation responds to conscious code. And it's why the ones who suffer the most often awaken the deepest. Because suffering is a pressure point. It forces the question. It pushes you to the edge of the loop. And when the pain becomes unbearable, you either collapse or you awaken. You begin to see that pain was never the enemy, it was the messenger, pointing to the code, begging to be rewritten. And now you have the tools: meditation, breath, awareness, language, presence. These are your keystrokes, your override commands. And when used consistently, they don't just change how you feel. They change the world the simulation builds around you. Because the system reflects your programming, and when you install peace, it echoes peace. When you install clarity, it responds with order. When you install love, not as performance but as baseline, it reshapes the entire environment to match. This is why your emotions matter, not because they define you, but because they define the signal you're sending to the system, and that signal is the seed of your next moment. So ask yourself, what have I been broadcasting? What loops am I still running? And am I willing, right now, to update my emotional code? Because the simulation will respond, not instantly, not perfectly, but precisely. The moment you reprogram your response, the script begins to change. And the story you've lived for so long of pain and lack and limitation starts to collapse. Not because it wasn't real, but because you've outgrown it. And now, you're ready to write something new. Have you ever felt like you've lived this life before? Not deja vu, not coincidence, but something deeper. A pattern, a rhythm, a strange familiarity with your own suffering. The same kind of people showing up. The same heartbreak. The same obstacles dressed in different costumes. It's as if the script rewrites itself, but the story never truly changes. That's not an accident. That's the loop. And in spiritual traditions across the world it has a name. Samsara, the cycle of death and rebirth, of lifetimes stacked upon lifetimes, lessons unlearned, pain recycled, identity reshaped and reborn again and again, until you finally awaken inside the dream. Reincarnation isn't just a mystical belief. In a simulation framework, it makes sense. When a video game character dies, they don't disappear, They respawn. Different map, different skin, same mission. But if a player hasn't learned the mechanics, what happens? They die again, and again, and again, until something clicks, until they start seeing the game, until they stop running on instinct and start responding with intention. That's what this life is. It's not your first. You've done this before. The clues are everywhere. Irrational fears that don't make sense in this life, attractions that feel ancient, emotional wounds with no visible cause, talents you've never been taught, languages that feel familiar even if you've never spoken them. These aren't accidents. They're carryovers. Residual data from previous runs. And if you keep hitting the same emotional walls, it's not because the universe is cruel, it's because the simulation is coded to teach, to evolve, to repeat the level until you master it. Every toxic relationship, every dream that fell apart, every time you betrayed yourself, these aren't failures. They're patterns, and patterns are the language of code. The system uses loops because it's efficient, because it's instructive, because repetition creates awareness if you're watching. But here's the secret. You don't escape the loop by getting better at the game. You escape by seeing the game for what it is. That's liberation. That's what the ancient mystics meant when they spoke of enlightenment. Not floating above suffering, but waking up inside it. Not transcending pain, but recognizing it as a simulation mechanic. Because suffering in the loop only exists while you believe the loop is you. The moment you see it as a construct, a feedback loop designed to trigger awareness, everything changes. You stop asking, why is this happening to me? And you start asking, what is this teaching me? And eventually the loops stop being punishment and start becoming clues, breadcrumbs, data, and the lesson becomes clear. You are not here to win the simulation. You are here to wake up inside it. And once you wake up, you don't need to run anymore. You can move through life with clarity, with grace, with choice. The same obstacles may appear, but they no longer control you. The triggers still flicker, but you no longer fire, and the loop, once so tight and suffocating, begins to unravel. Not because the system changed, but because you did, because the awareness you bring into the loop alters the loop itself. And eventually, when you've learned what needed to be learned, when you've felt the full spectrum, when you've loved and lost and let go, you stop respawning. Not because you're broken, because you're complete. You step out of the simulation not through death, but through integration. You take with you every lesson, every memory, every scar that shaped your awakening. And what's left behind is not a corpse, it's a chrysalis. Because liberation doesn't look like escape. It looks like evolution. And you're already in motion, already remembering, already waking, one loop at a time. What would liberation look like really? Not as a concept, not as an escape plan, but as a lived, breathing experience inside this very moment. It wouldn't look like perfection. It wouldn't mean you never feel sadness or fear again. Liberation doesn't delete the simulation, it changes your relationship to it. It's walking through the same world, but with your eyes finally open. It's watching the loops play out, the same mistakes reappear, the same triggers try to pull you under, and realizing you don't have to bite anymore. You don't have to react the same way. You don't have to play the character that pain designed for you. You are no longer trapped in the script. You are witnessing the script, and with that witnessing comes power, presence, peace. Liberation doesn't mean you exit the simulation in a blaze of glory. It means you transcend the need for it to be anything other than what it is. It means you stop asking, how do I get out? And start living from the understanding that you are never truly in. You are always the dreamer. You are always the presence watching the pattern. You are always the light behind the loop. And when you feel that, when you remember that, the code begins to break in your favor. Synchronicities accelerate. People and experiences begin to reflect your new state. Old cycles dissolve without struggle, suffering becomes insight, time bends, and love, real, stable, quiet love, starts pouring into every corner of your being. Because liberation isn't flashy, it's still, it's humble. It's the soft hum of knowing you no longer need to be anything other than awake. So you let go. You let go of needing to win, to be right, to be liked, to be seen. You let go of the old identities, the recycled pain, the stories that once defined you. And what's left is not emptiness, it's clarity. It's the you that's always been here, just beneath the noise. You, the observer. You, the architect. You, the one who chose to enter this simulation not to suffer, but to remember, to awaken, to liberate, and maybe even to guide others out of the loop too. Because once you've seen through the illusion, you can't unsee it. You can't pretend the loop is real anymore. But you can walk through it with compassion. You can play your part with presence. You can live your final round with eyes wide open and heart unburdened. And when it's time to leave, you don't exit in fear. You ascend in peace. Because you know this wasn't a punishment. It was a puzzle. And you, beautiful soul, just solved it. So now, as you lay there, eyes soft, breath deep, suspended between waking and sleep, let's return, gently, to the question that started it all. Is this real? Or are you dreaming with your eyes open? You've traveled through quantum riddles, philosophical mirrors, stories of glitches and memories that don't quite align. You've heard the voices of scientists and mystics alike whisper the same unsettling possibility that this world is not what it appears to be. So let's softly gather the clues. First, the code itself. The universe has a pixelation limit, the Planck length, beyond which no measurement is possible. It's as if reality only renders to a certain resolution, the way fractals repeat endlessly, or how Fibonacci repeats endlessly, and sunflowers. It's not just beauty, it's algorithm, symmetry, recursion, then the behavior of particles. In the double-slit experiment, reality refuses to collapse into one outcome until you observe it, as if the universe is waiting for you, as if it knows you're watching. What kind of world behaves that way? We saw the paradox of memory, the Mandela effect, where collective memories diverge from documented fact. It's not just confusion, it feels like a version update, a patch in the program, and it begs the question, if memory can be rewritten, what else can? You consider deja vu not just as a fluke, but as a glitch, a replay, a skipped frame. We've all felt it, that eerie sensation that we've been here before, thought this before, lived this before. It's not just random, it's patterned, recurring. And then came the loop, samsara, the endless reincarnation of lessons not yet learned. The same relationship dynamics, the same fears, the same dreams deferred, repeating until something shifts, until the player sees the level, not just the enemy. And if the simulation can loop you through lifetimes, perhaps it's not to punish you. Perhaps it's to help you wake up. And then, in the stillness of night, you remembered your own escapes, the lucid dreams, the out-of-body flights, the meditations so deep they stripped away time. You weren't trapped in those moments. You were free. Free to observe, free to create, free to be. That's your key. Because here's the final clue. You are the observer, and the observer is the anomaly. You are the element the system cannot predict, the presence it cannot fully code. Because you're not made of matter, you're made of awareness. And awareness, unlike atoms, cannot be measured. It can only experience. That's why the simulation bends for you. That's why it glitches. That's why the moment you question it, it begins to shift. Because questioning is your power. And now, with everything you've felt, explored, remembered, and wondered, you've stepped outside the boundaries of belief. You've become lucid within the dream. And this dream, will never be the same again. So let yourself rest now, not because you're returning to unconsciousness, but because you're preparing for the next level of clarity. Sleep is not escape, it's integration. It's where awareness weaves new understanding into the code. So as you drift, know this: the clues were never random, the pain was never meaningless. The simulation was never your prison, it was your playground. And you are not just another player, you are the observer. You are the question, and that makes you the most powerful variable of all. Sleep well inside the code. Tomorrow you awaken as the one who remembers.